Alright, now let's move on over to the disappointed category. I selected a few films for this one. The first movie that disappointed me this year, and let's see how many of you remember this movie. This movie came out in January of 2013, and it was also the first movie that was reviewed on the channel. It's Gangster Squad. Supposedly inspired by true events, Gangster Squad is about a secret police organization led by Ryan Gosling and James Brolin as they try to track down the ruthless mob king Mickey Cohen, played by Sean Penn. Based on the trailers, the movie did seem to have a very vibe reminiscent of the late 40s, and it definitely looked interesting, but Gangster Squad ended up being an uneven movie loaded with gangster film cliches you would find from genre films of the 30s and 40s, and the first half of it had the sort of look of a routine TV movie loaded with stock characters. And, pardon me, the writer of this movie, Will Deal, he has a background in writing for TV dramas where you have an hour to tell the story, so you oftentimes have to rely on stock characters like a smart-ass character or a seductress character to help get through the story. But with a film, you have more time to develop their personas. I think it did get a little bit better in the second half with a little bit more character development and a little bit more conflict, but it was a good looking movie and it was fine for viewing at home, I thought. But Gangster Squad, I thought, was a big missed opportunity. I felt like it could have been a more complex story about the stress of trying to find a way to stop Mickey Cohen. But overall, it was a nice rental, in my opinion, but for me, it was a big disappointment. The next movie that disappointed me was Identity Thief, a somewhat long comedy that got off to a good start and had a good ending, but I felt like the middle kind of rotated between being something that was very amusing to having bits that fell flat. Now, I just want to say, I really like Melissa McCarthy. I think she can be funny, as the movie The Heat demonstrated later on last year. But I also like that the film was timely, with covering stuff like how the economy is bad and the rise of identities being stolen. But I found the script to be very mediocre, and I really didn't laugh out loud as much as I wanted to. The performances were kind of what kept me involved in the film. I found McCarthy to be believable as the selfish thief, and Jason Bateman as a caring man who is determined to have this problem fixed. But there is no one you can really latch out to. I mean, you can't latch onto McCarthy's character because we're not supposed to. You know, she's mean, she's selfish, and you can't, sometimes you really can't help but hate her. And I mean, at first I really did feel sorry for Bateman at first, but that was before he sort of got turned into a caricature later on in the film. I mean, there is also a subplot involving an assassin, which I found unnecessary. Somehow Melissa McCarthy's character is doing business with them, which I found very hard to believe. And I think the cast did what they could, but I felt like the script could have been sharper and perhaps a little bit more tighter. The third of 5 movies that I found to be a little bit disappointing this year was the movie that I was really looking forward to the most this past summer, and it was The Great Gatsby. I was really looking forward to this adaptation by Baz Luhrmann, who has directed some showy films in the past, and Great Gatsby was one of those experiences where I liked it, but yet I disliked it at the same time. On the one hand, it was wonderful to look at, with glamorous shots and camera movement, but I felt like Luhrmann only scratched the surface with how complex these characters really are. The first half of the movie I found to be very showy and fast-paced, but as a result of this fast pace, it was really hard to get involved with the characters. But halfway through, the film slowed down, and we could focus on the characters and the conflicts that are taking place at that point, and we get to see some actors showing something with their parts, but I felt like it was a little bit too late at this point. I really felt like I didn't get to know these characters enough for me to feel for anybody. And interestingly enough, having current music in the soundtrack did not really bug me as it did some other people. Actually, I thought it added to the chaotic atmosphere at Gatsby's parties. Now, Great Gatsby I didn't think was a horrible disaster, but it was not a masterpiece either. I think people that like movies more for the visuals will definitely enjoy it, but I'm not sure if avid fans of the book, The Great Gatsby, would have been satisfied with it. The next movie that disappointed me this year was Now You See Me, an amusing film with some twists and turns about magicians who are being portrayed as anti-heroes. The problem that I had with this movie was the same problem that I had with The Great Gatsby. The first half of the movie felt rushed, with quick cuts, some camera swoop moves, and people talking really fast like they're trying to cram a lot in. And as a result, I really couldn't get into the characters, even though the 4 magicians, have different personalities. But another issue that I had with Now You See Me was I did not know who I was supposed to be rooting for. The magicians who are robbing corporations to help people but yet come across as arrogant and sometimes unlikable, or the FBI agent played by Mark Ruffalo who is really determined to get these guys down and his team keeps screwing up somehow. I kept changing sides throughout the film. I thought the actors did what they could with their performances and the action scenes were well done, but I felt like a lot of moments just came out of nowhere. And the fifth movie that kind of now this one is, again, it was one of the most controversial movies with people being really polarized toward this movie. This is one of those movies where I keep changing my mind about whether I liked the movie or whether I didn't like the movie. But this was Man of Steel. Now before you guys go crazy with any comments, let me just say I liked that Zack Snyder tried new things with the iconic character, including, you know, making his backstory a little bit more relatable. For example, when he's growing up, you know, we're living in a world with a lot of school bullying and making him more vulnerable. I thought also made him very relatable to audiences, and I really thought that Henry Cavill did an excellent job with the character. I really liked that the villain was not Lex Luthor but General Zod from Superman's planet of Krypton. But at the same time, I felt the movie was a little bit overstuffed. Like, for example, the big fight scene with Zod and Superman literally tearing the city apart. Now, if I was a citizen, I would be so pissed off at Superman, I would get a lynch mob together and kick the crap out of him. I also found Amy Adams to be a little bit forgettable as Lois Lane, and now this is where the shaky cam comes back in with my complaints. I hated that the camera kept moving the whole time. Like, the whole time, it would be going from side to side. Somebody told me that he did it kind of like as if people were recording a movie from like their camera phones or what have you, but keeping the camera moving the whole time really gave me a headache, and I felt like it didn't add to anything. It's not like World War Z where crowds are rushing and it's moving to kind of add to it. I felt like he was doing it just to do it, and for me, I felt like it didn't add anything. I really hope that Snyder tightens the next film and he pulls back on all the camera work. I guess what I'm saying is I like Snyder's story and character choices, just not the aesthetic ones. Okay, now here's my pick for the worst movie of the year, and granted, it's probably not really the worst movie of the year. Like I said at the beginning of this video, I didn't really always have the time and money to go see movies like I've done in the past, so I had to be a little bit more picky with what I went to see. So I ended up avoiding movies that I thought were bad, and some people said that they ended up being bad anyway. But this is my pick for the worst movie of the year, and it's probably not really the worst movie for some people. For me, I gave it a rented on DVD rating when it came out, but this was probably the one that I didn't enjoy out of all the movies I saw this year. This movie is R.I.P.D. with Ryan Reynolds. Now, I really like the concept behind it, but I felt like it should not have been made as a big-budget summer special effects blockbuster, but as a modest-budget, weird, dark, quirky comedy. It's based off of a comic book, and I thought the humor is very deadpan, and Mary Louise Parker, who plays Ryan Reynolds' superior, does a good job at bringing that humor out in her role, and she plays the character running the department, but I felt like it just did not work as a blockbuster. For example, I thought the CGI was overused, and it wasn't really very good to begin with. It was rather comical looking. For example, when Jeff Bridges and Ryan Reynolds' characters are chasing after these deado characters that they're supposed to, bring down, it looked like they were chasing cartoon characters. I felt like they could have been scarier. They should have been scarier than how they looked. And while I was watching this movie, I couldn't help but remember the good old days of when movie studios actually had people dressed up in makeup. Like, I felt like, like Rick Baker, or if anybody remembers Dick Smith, they could make these characters up to look very monstrous and scary looking. I felt like I don't know if it was too expensive or what, but I think that it would have been more effective if they'd done it that way. And performance-wise, sometimes Ryan Reynolds I thought was great, but there were other times where it sounded like he was just mumbling. And Jeff Bridges has played these sort of Rooster Cogburn Southern-like characters before. And I mean, he did very well, but you've seen him play it before. And I also thought the story was a bit predictable. Again, it wasn't a bad movie. I thought it was an alright movie to rent, but I felt like it should not have been made as a big budget movie. Alright, so that's my list. Go ahead and I'm going to open the floor to you. Tell me what the movies that you're either your list of the best or worst movies, or movies you were disappointed in, what you liked, whatever you want. Go ahead and post your comments and tell me what you guys thought. I do greatly appreciate it, and thank you very much for watching this video.